Well, welcome everyone. My name is Casey. As Christine said, I've spoken with many of you through customer care before, so it's, like I said, nice to put faces to names. We're going to be talking about the art form Zentangle, or some people call it Zendoodle. But we're going to be talking about that and how you can use it to create mindfulness in yourself and acceptance of what things are. So I don't know how many folks have done work with either Zentangle or with mindfulness before, but mindfulness is a technique that I learned through therapy. Therapy is great. I think everybody should do therapy, whether you think you need it or not. It's awesome. It is one of those things that you can do for yourself it's very simple. But when learning the mindfulness practice, it focused on several things such as acceptance of imperfection, of what is. It focused on I'm sorry, my cat is doing a thing. It focused on some definite patterns of behavior and changing the way you react to things. So it's a little esoteric. So first I'm going to show you an example of what I do. So Zentangle is a series of repeating patterns. So here you can see one repeating pattern. And then this one is one of my favorite repeating patterns to do. Now that's probably one that anyone can start with as well, because it is very simple. But as you can see, the simplicity of it is sort of deceptive, because when you take just making tiny small circles together, you can create incredibly intricate little patterns. Another thing that Zentangle often relates to is the natural world. So you'll see a lot of floral patterns here, or spider webs. So how does this sort of type of art relate to mindfulness? So when you are practicing this form of art, the idea is basically to create the patterns, let the motion of your hands relax you as you draw. And if you do not do it perfectly, pause, accept what it is, and work it into the pattern. You do not correct, you accept. And so by doing this in an artistic manner, you're releasing some inhibitions, you're releasing some tension by doing this motion and tying your physical motion into what you're doing with your brain is very effective for changing moods and uplifting spirits. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how I moved through the art. So I thought I would start by showing you the very first pieces that I ever did. And as you can see, at one point, I was not accepting of imperfection at all. This was actually the first one I did. I got lucky. As you can see here, it's a fairly simple pattern of scales with little circles inside them, or lines with repeating angles drawn in them, or even just little squiggles, shaded. But there is some limitations to what you do with this, because as you can see, everything is drawn inside of a square. Now that doesn't necessarily have to inhibit you. If you want to draw a different shape, you definitely can. But a square is an excellent place to start, because it is a simple design that most people can get a hand of. So let's see here. Other examples of nature in Zentangle, such as leaves, right here. This pattern is somewhat like bamboo. And these patterns over here with the cross hatching come to resemble clouds. I'm going to flip through a few more pieces to give you some idea of what we're going to be doing today. So this is another piece. If you use your imagination, you can kind of see a river flowing through mountains. This was a pattern that I really come to love, a little jellyfish. This pattern is a little bit more advanced. If you see, this pattern actually starts as a series of dots, and I'm going to show you how patterns like that work and how it's very simple to create them. And when I said you had to limit yourself to squares, obviously, that wasn't entirely true. So you can draw any shape that you want to start with, but I am going to recommend the square still. But this is some place that you can go with it if you continue to work with it. You can sort of even release the idea of a square from your head. So this is a portfolio of my earlier stuff. Now, some of my more recent things. See how the use of dots varies throughout here. Whoop, let me see if I can get a better focus on that for you folks. So here are a bunch of little dots, but when you back away from it, it resembles foam or water. It's a very, very simple way to create a natural pattern. Again, the jellyfish, the little curlicues, that is a personal thing. You don't have to do curlicues, but I always love them. So they end up in a lot of my art. Let's see here. When you go a little bit further with it, you can even add in things that are not repeating patterns in certain parts to go along with the patterns themselves. So here I have a little drawing of some cattails, which I can definitely show because these flowers here are actually reasonably simple. And these are some of the easiest things to draw. So, and one last one before we get going with some grounding exercises, and then we're going to start drawing. So here's one last one. Oop, and I think that may be upside down. Or perhaps it isn't. That's the other beautiful thing about this. Upside down is sort of right side up. It's a very Alice in Wonderland sort of feeling sometimes. All right. So I'm going to actually leave that there while we do a grounding exercise. So I'm going to have you all sit with your feet as flat and your knees as straight as you can get them, and put your palms on top of your thighs with your arms bent at your sides, and let your eyes get soft and relax. And we're going to do a little bit of a grounding exercise. So grounding is what makes you connected with your body when you are having not so great a time. You can use it in times of stress, in times of sadness. You can use it to center yourself if you are angry about something and you want to be more reasonable. So from this position, with your softened eyes, I'm going to have you just flex your toes up and down. Just your toes up and down. And feel how they feel to you. Notice if there's any unusual discomfort. If there's any pain, obviously do not do the motion. But just the gentleness of your toes. Then if you can, flex at your ankle. And do the same for your foot. Notice if there's any tension, any soreness, anything that feels not right. You can also take this time to press your feet against the floor and sort of feel that you're here in this moment, in this presence. And there doesn't necessarily have to be anything else. You can just be here with your feet on your ground and your palms on your thighs. So now I'm going to move up and have you flex your calf muscles. Flex and release, flex and release, flex and release, okay? Now gently, the thighs ones are a tricky one for me. They always have been. I can't flex them by myself. If you can, try it. If you can't, just observe the feeling of your palms on your thighs. And notice if there's anything difficult to move or stiffness or anything like that. And when you observe that something doesn't feel quite right, you need to make note of it so that you can reflect on it at a better time than when you were trying to center yourself, and then let it pass. And you're going to move on to the next part of your body. So I'm going to have you wiggle your hips a little bit. Just wiggle them in the chair, wiggle them around. And flex your lower back, back and forth, back and forth. Observe any tension. Press your shoulders back into your chair and forward. Hunch your shoulders over and press your shoulder blades back into your chair. Notice your back. Backs can be tricky too, so be very gentle. Roll your shoulders. Feel the way they move. Roll them forward, roll them back. Just observe. If there's any pain, any discomfort, note it, observe it, and move on. Make note so that you can come back and reflect. Now you're going to put some tension into your arms. And you're going to flex your wrists. So I'm going to bring my hands up. So if you're observing, just flex your wrists back and forth like this, side to side if you can. And now I'm going to have you flex your fingers out, flex them back as far as you can towards the back of your hand, and curl them up gently into a fist. Feel the tension relax. And again, observe anything that does not feel quite right. Make note of it. Allow it to pass. All right, now I'm going to have you do that a few times with your hands because it helps to limber up your hands for what we're about to do. And I'm going to have you roll your neck around very gently with your neck. Don't do any motions that you shouldn't be doing. And gently bounce it back, bop it back and forth from shoulder to shoulder. And forward and back. Then I'm going to have you scrunch up your whole face like a raisin. Just squeeze it real tight. And release. And squeeze just your eyes this time. And release. If you can, wiggle your ears or the back of your head. Some people can do it, some people are not able to, but if you can't move it, just sort of pay attention to it, observe it. Note if anything feels strange. I have an itch on my scalp right now. I'm not going to itch it, but it's there. I'm going to release the itch. All right, and now I'm going to squint my eyes one more time with you guys, and I'm going to open them up. Now, hopefully, you feel very much in the moment. You've released anything else that's going on. You've got focus on your body and yourself. And we're going to try and start a drawing now. So if you're going to be drawing along, what's great about this is everyone is going to come up with something different. So you saw the different ways that I was able to break up the drawing. So here, I drew a square, and then inside the square, I broke it up with the same Sharpie into different sections in different shapes. Now it can look like that. Yes? Did I have a question? Oh, no. You can break it up in half and then draw lines through it. You can make a recognizable shape inside the square, such as a star. All right. So what we're going to start with is we're going to take our Sharpie or marker, whichever you have, and we're going to decide on our first shape that we're going to start with. So I'm going to try and keep my drawing where you can see it. Oh, and I see a hand. Let me see here. Bear with me. I don't see a hand raised anymore, but if there is a question, definitely put it in the chat box because that's the best way for me to see it. All right, so we're going to start here. No, you do not. You definitely don't have to be drawing along. You can just observe. It is recorded, so you can come back and draw along at a later time. But you can definitely just observe. So we're going to start. I'm going to start with the square. So again, even starting with the square, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see how the marker bleeds into the paper. You can observe very slowly how something sort of appears out of nothing. And even though it's not the best square, it's my square. So we start with a simple shape. And from that, one of the easiest things you can do is a grid. You can do an arch, but I'm going to start with something kind of fun. So I'm going to have you draw, if you would like to follow along, or you can make your own shape. I'm going to have you break this up into at least 4 sections. So you can have more, you can have less. I'm going to do it like this. And we're going to work on a couple patterns. Now, let's see here. All right, so I suggested for the recommended materials, either a stiff paper like cardstock, and a Sharpie with a double end like this one. This is an ultra fine point. This is a fine point. That's the easiest way to get into it. It's super inexpensive. You can do it on just plain white paper, and it's an easy thing to find. Yeah.
How do you draw so good?
Oh, thank you. I've been doing it for years, and I think that it's something that anybody can do as long as they practice it. And I think that this is an excellent place for folks to start, because I think that everybody can break into their artistic self somehow. So
You draw better than me.
thank you. So what we're going to start with. Yep.
Can you give us just a general idea, approximately how big is your square?
Oh, yes, definitely. So you can start with any shape. I'm drawing it really large because I want you guys to be able to see it. But for example, and I'm so sorry, something is happening with my phone. Okay, so these squares are only about, I'd say, 4 inches by 4 inches. So you can definitely start with smaller ones. And what's great about smaller ones is that if you're just beginning, sometimes your hand gets stiff doing the patterns. So you're going to want to do a smaller source of the patterns. You can move on to bigger squares as you go. But that was a great question. Thank you. sides. But this one, this square, I would say is about 7 by 7. So it's a big one. This is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I'm using Bristol board. It's a really smooth paper that doesn't bleed a lot. That's why I use it. But with this art form, again, you can observe the way the ink bleeds. You can use it. For example, I'm going to bring this down a little bit. This corner here sort of has a blob in it. I don't know if you folks can see it, but it's sort of got a blob. So what I can do is take this little fine point and sort of smooth the blob if I want to. So this is not correcting. This is adapting. So it's using that blob and making it part of the art. But the first one we're going to start with is a very simple one. What you're going to do is pick one of your sections, doesn't matter which one, whichever one feels right now, and you're going to start, and you're just going to draw a line of evenly spaced little dots down it. I'm doing them about 1 centimeter apart, or about, I'd say, a little over a 1/2 inch. And you're just going to make a little grid. Very simple. You're going to space your dots about 1 centimeter apart. And the idea is to fill the space that you've selected with these little dots. Now you'll notice there's some natural variation in the distance between them. That's okay. Notice it, observe it. It's going to affect your pattern, but that's part of what makes it very naturalistic and very relaxing, is that it does not matter that they are not precisely that distance apart. So we're going to do this a little bit. And of course, I'm going a little bit quickly because we don't have a ton of time, and I'd like to show you a couple patterns, but you can definitely just do as you would like, as much as you want. If you don't have a full grid when we get to the next step, that's okay. You can start on the next step before the first step is done. It's a very, very forgiving sort of process. And that's part of what that's part of what makes it so relaxing, what makes it so so good for you, because when you start to accept your mistakes in one place as part of it, when you do make that mistake and it's not withdrawing, it's easier to forgive yourself for that because you've taught yourself, you've practiced on something small. So this is a very centering process. All right. Now, there's a bunch of different patterns that you can do starting with this. This is a great basis, and you can even make them up. The important part is to just repeat what you do over and over again. All right. So what am I going to do with this? I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to draw an arch. And then I'm going to draw another arch. And I'm just going to draw a bunch of little arches. I'm going to pretend there's a dot there. Sometimes dots are imaginary in art. And then I'm going to do the same here. And see, it turns out that maybe this wasn't a grid. Maybe this was something else the whole time. And again, that's okay. It's okay when things don't fit your expectations. It's okay when things have to be adapted. So here you see one pattern that you can do. Now what's beautiful about something like this is there's a lot of directions you can go with it. I'm going to show you a few different directions so that you can sort of think of different ways, and I encourage you to try one that you like, and maybe stick with it for the whole pattern, or maybe you just do what I'm about to do and sort of mess around with it a little. But here's one fun pattern. Suddenly, it becomes links of a chain. And you can do that with all of them. So another thing that I want to talk to you about, as you can kind of listen and draw along, is places you can go to get inspiration for stuff like this, because this is an actual whole community of artists who do this. In a funny way, Instagram, if you use the hashtag Zendoodle or Zentangle, you will come up with a number of pieces of art that you can use. You'll come up with little videos that people do, like this one, of people showing how patterns work. And you can watch some truly masterful artists make some amazing pieces just appear out of thin air. And sometimes, I don't know if anyone has heard about ASMR, which is a thing that many people use to get to sleep. It is a sound technique that sort of raises the prickles on the back of your neck a little bit, but it helps some people sleep as well. And one of the sounds that ASMR does is it amplifies the noise of someone drawing on paper. So as you can imagine, ASMR people really like this art form too, because they like just watching a video and listening to somebody scritching a pen across the paper. And that's something else to notice too. And I did sort of lose track there and complete the pattern on one side. So it turns from a grid into waves into a chain. And each of them can be added to or connected to in other ways. You can think of other ways that you can complete this pattern. You could fill little eye shapes in here. You can follow the lines of the outside just on the inside a little bit and create a really interesting alternating pattern. Reminds me of those old school motels that you see in cop shows with the really cool 70s, 60s decor. But you can let your mind wander as you do this. You don't have to necessarily, fully connect with the drawing. There's two things that can happen. One is you can become very, very focused on the pattern, and you can sort of use that focus to relax and release. Or you can come to a point when you focused and suddenly the anxiety and the pressure that was keeping you outside of your own head can be just sort of dispersed. So this is this. Now, as I said, I'm not going to complete the pattern because I wanted to show you a few different ways of doing this. But the first one, just as a reminder, is a grid. By connecting the grid in different ways, you can create different things. Here I used curves. On this half, I could use straight lines. Again, this is sometimes you have to pretend that there are dots there when there aren't. It's sort of like your own mind creating a connect the dots game. It's like making pictures in the clouds. So you can see there, that creates a very different effect. Kind of looks like somebody was sewing the paper together, perhaps. But if you add another line here, it suddenly becomes much more like lightning. So I encourage you to play around with a grid pattern because you can create all kinds of different things within it. And these are things that are coming from you. All right, so let's check the time. All right. So here, I'm going to show you one of my favorite patterns. Now this is a fun one. It starts with the little circles that I described to you. It's this one here. And it starts with these little circles. And then you take these circles, draw a little lump around them, just a simple little lump. And then you draw some straight lines. And this is the effect. So let's see how that is actually accomplished. So over here, I'm going to draw a little cluster of just tiny little circles. They don't all have to be the same size. You can have like big ones and little ones. Because the natural world, while it does make beautiful things, doesn't always make absolutely perfect things. And that, again, remember, is okay. So we're going to draw a bunch of little clusters. And again, circles are one of my favorites because they somehow are complete. The way you start one place and you connect it to another. So we're basically here making the centers of the flowers. Then you just draw a wavy line around it. Doesn't really matter. Let it go, make it crazy. You can draw another line around this one here. And then this guy, I'm going to make sort of curve into the other one. I don't know if you folks have ever seen the way trees grow, but if you ever have lain on your back in a forest on a sunny day and looked up at the canopy, you'll see that a lot of the times the trees come so close to touching each other, but don't quite touch, and they create this lovely sort of gap between them. This sort of mimics that, but again, you don't have to create complete shapes if you're up against an edge. Kind of looks like weird little eggs for now. Weird eggs on a strange triangle plate. So what you do from here is you've got your eggs with the little clusters of circles in the middle, and you just take one point on the outside line and you bring it into the inside. Then you skip over the middle and complete it. Then you're going to draw another one, make an X. Then you're going to just keep dividing everything in half. So you very slowly work out. And you draw lines across so that they sort of balance each other out. So even though it's not a symmetrical shape, even though it's not an even shape, it is somehow balanced. Another similar one that I will show if we have time also takes the idea of balance very seriously. but in a very loose way. So as you can see, I just made a mistake. I was hoping that this would happen. When you practice a lot, sometimes these don't occur when you want them to. But I just made a very bad mistake here. I went outside the line. That bugs me, but I'm going to let it go. And here, my line isn't quite straight. That bugs me, but I'm going to let it go. Because even though I made a mistake, I can still make it a beautiful thing, simply by continuing on as I was before and allowing it to be as it is. So even though I went outside the lines and I didn't bisect and I didn't do everything nice and even like I wanted to, I still end up with a lovely flower. Now, these you can get clustered very close and make the flower look like a dark flower. These you can cluster very far apart, make it look like a light flower. As you add lines, you sometimes might find yourself not necessarily drawing connections to them. You can make it a little All right, so I see the question about using a ruler. Now, that is something that you definitely can do if it makes you a little bit more comfortable. The question was, does anybody use a ruler in Zentangle? And it's funny because I have a bunch of tools that I have gotten. Now I'm going to show you some of them because it relates to the question. But if you feel more comfortable doing it this way, you can use a tool like this. Now this is a weird little gauge that has, you can't really see it, has little circles cut out in it. It also, let me see if I can find it. All right, so I do have a ruler. As you can see, I was a little bit off on my estimation of the size of this thing. It's closer to 8 inches, but whatever. So you can use a ruler. I'm going to recommend against using a ruler until you've gotten to the point where you can, I'm going to use a really funny term, until you can zen out very quickly. Because part of the purpose of this is not just to create the art, it's also to calm yourself and to teach yourself acceptance. So using a ruler might defeat the purpose a little bit if you're doing it for relaxation and well-being purposes. But if you want to use it for artistic purposes, there are no limits in art. So you do you. And that is one of the most serious things that you can say in art is you do you. So we're gonna do a few more of these little guys. And you just make little X's, skipping the middle a little bit. They don't have to be perfectly straight. The important part is you're trying to do something. And as you do it more and more, you're getting better at it. But as you're making mistakes along the way, it's okay. Now, I'm going to bring in another piece of art that I did to show you where these can end up. So these started out like that. As you can see, they've got the little cluster in the middle, and I'm sorry it's sort of blurry. They've got the little cluster in the middle. They've got the lines coming out from the edges. And then in some of the lines, I drew the little circles. And it creates a really interesting pearlescent effect on the form. This here started as a grid originally and ended up like that. And as you can probably guess, I had an emotional connection to this piece. It's very dark. It was a turbulent piece to draw, but it did get worked out through the creation of these pieces. So the last one I'm going to do is the little circles. Now the reason I'm gonna have you do, yeah, and let me check the chat again. All right. So the little circles are a lot of fun. And what they do is you just start making, and I don't think this is going to be the last one that I do because I have a little bit more time. They can be the same size. They can be different sizes. They can be a rock wall. They can be the foam of water. Just little circles, little things that have a beginning and an end, and they meet together. You can make them bigger, smaller. And the idea with this is this one is extremely simple, but what's beautiful about the simple ones is they really allow you to relax your mind. So as you can see, what I'm doing is taking the edges of the ones that I created and just sort of filling it in and seeing where it takes me. I don't know where this is going at all. I really, really don't. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know what it's going to look like when it's done. I just know that while I'm doing it, I'm here, I am centered, and I am calm. So here, I've created a little mass of circles. You can keep going with that. You can fill this whole space with those circles, and it will look amazing. Just a bunch of little circles. There is on Instagram an artist called Monkey Doodling. That's MONKEYDOODLING. Monkey Doodling, spelled just like it sounds. And the only thing that they draw is little circles. They use color. They don't just do it in black and white. But if you go to Instagram and you look up Monkey Doodling, you will probably get some weird results. I apologize for those in advance. It is the internet. But you will, oh, I see somebody showing some art. Hold on. Christine, are you able to spotlight Beatrice at all? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Give me a minute.
Okay, cool. So we have somebody showing off some art, and I encourage, oh, wow. Exactly. So I see you have some scales, and you have some grids, and you have some wavy lines. Yes, that is great. Thank you so much. So you see, you can do them quick. You can do them long. I have a piece that is, I do have a piece that I've been working on for about 3 years. It is 2 feet by 2 feet. It does incorporate these, and it does incorporate another little pattern that I would really love to show you because it creates such a beautiful effect. It can be fireworks, it can be chrysanthemums, but this, oh, and I hope the camera shows it well. Oh, this in here, I'm going to draw a little bit bigger than I have drawn here. Let me jump to the chat again. Okay, just have some compliments for the art. Let me check. All right, I don't see any other art up right now. All right, so this next pattern, I'm going to do in the same little bubble as here. I'm gonna at some point finish this up, but for now I just want a space to show you this pattern. For this pattern, you start in the middle. You don't start at the edges like you did with the little circles. You kind of just make a teardrop. Just a little teardrop. And then you give it a friend. I get very Bob Ross sometimes, so. And you just keep making little teardrops just next to each other. And they are shaped like teardrops, but they're the happy type of cry. They're the I found my lost puppy cry. It's good. And then next to it, you just draw another. Now, this seems super simple. It's something that everybody's done in their notebooks when they weren't totally paying attention in class. It's very simple. You just sort of draw one shape after another, the same shape over and over. And then when you get enough of them sort of drawn around like that, in the teardrop pattern, which you notice gets dark in the center as you draw it, you don't have to do anything, it creates its own little center mass. You can start clustering them. Now clustering is a little bit trickier. Clustering, you want to go right up to the edge of the other pieces, but not over it. So you want to sort of link them together, but not cross them. So it's just little teardrop shapes still, nothing crazy. And again, not all of these are perfectly teardrop shaped. Some of them are a little lumpy. That's okay. Now, I really love the chrysanthemum one because, yep, let's see here. I'm not sure I totally understand you, Sue. Would you stop the line to make it look behind? Oh, let's see here. Am I connecting? Am I not showing up?
No, you're there. I think she's saying like when you're connecting them, like rather than completing the petal, would you kind of stop it to make it look like maybe it's behind the other flower?
Yes, so that's one way of doing it. Yes, you can definitely do it that way. The way I'm doing it in this particular example is I'll do it over here where it's sort of bigger. I'm taking the teardrop and I'm coming right up to the edge and I'm meeting it and I'm going around. So if it's a little bit close, the petal will come out kind of stubby. If it's a little bit further away, it might come out long and lean. So like if I were to do something like this, you get a long and lean one. Because not all flowers come out the perfect little thing. Some of them are a little disfigured. Some of them are a little discolored. Some of them are a little this, just that. Let's not diss anything. Let's say all flowers are beautiful. So, and I've seen one of those corpse flowers twice. I've seen them bloom and that was beautiful, stinky, but beautiful. I recommend it if you ever have the opportunity to go check it out. They bloom once every 100 years. Or 125 years, something up there. They kind of look like Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors, but they are still beautiful. All right, so you can kind of cluster them like that. And then as you can see, when you fill a space with that, it creates a different effect. Oh, that's sort of, let's see. I think the pattern might actually be working against the camera. All right, so let me check. Okay. So I think I have time for one more fun one. Now this one I'm going to do with a different type of marker. So you can do any of these with the Sharpie. The Sharpie is an excellent place to start. Like I said, it's inexpensive. You can find one easy. I think I got this one at the grocery store. But they also make different, they make artist's pens. I have a few different types of examples here. These, they come from, this is a pen. This is Artist Loft. This I think is Michael's main brand. This is Pigma Sense. This came from Amazon. And something that you will notice if you start working with these pens, or I also have one other type. Micron is the other brand. This is a brand that a lot of artists really like, Micron. You will notice that not all blacks are exactly the same color. So you're going to want, when you pick out your pens, to kind of find the ones that you like and stick with them. So for this one, I'm going to use a much finer point so that you can see the effect when you use something like this. This is a 0.03. It is very small. They go down to 0.005, which is super fine and definitely will give you a crisp little line. So there's a question in the chat, is Zentangle always black and white? So the Zentangle that I do is always black and white, but that does not mean that it always is black and white. I do encourage you, I probably should have pulled some examples of color, or let me see, but actually I do have an example, hold on. So if you go to, here's one. If you go and color them, they can come out real crazy. So this started as a black and white Zentangle that I colored with watercolor markers and then used a wet paintbrush to sort of smooth the watercolor markers together. Then what you see here, this shiny bit, that is a silver ink pen, and this over here is some gold ink pen that I went over some of the lines with to give it a sort of three-dimensional effect. So yeah, you can definitely use color in Zentangle. It's not what I usually do, but again, art is for you, not for anyone else. So while other people can enjoy your art and appreciate it and do that, thank you. You don't have to create it with anybody else's expectations in mind. You don't even have to use your own expectations. You can just release and relax and flow. All right, so the last one I'm going to show is the one that comes out like this, and I like to call it garlic knots. So it's a little indistinct. Let's see if I can get a better image of it. No, I don't think I can. But I am going to do it bigger so that you can see it a bit better. So this is called garlic because it looks like a pile of garlic, basically. Some of these have names that Zentanglers just refer to things as, but let's get that 0.3 micron back, or something that's a 0.3, something kind of small. Oh, well, here, I'll use a 1. So garlic is a little trickier. And you basically start out by making kind of a leaf shape, or an eye, maybe. Then you take that and you make another one that comes off of it. And you make another one that comes off of that. And you kind of just keep linking them together. Now you can have little ones come off of each other. And then when you have a few, and you've kind of worn out doing that shape with your hand, because that is something that does happen, is that when you're doing these repeated patterns, sometimes your hand cramps up on one pattern, so you'll want to change the motion that you're doing to sort of release that tension. That's totally natural. It just happens because, you know, none of us are, I think we have one young lady with us, but none of us are really girls anymore. We are now our adult members. So let's see here. We've got little garlicky things. And then when you're ready for the next step, you start filling them in and just connect the two lines inside. You don't have to do it a lot of lines. You can just do 2 or 3 in each little olive clove. Sometimes you have space for 4, sometimes you have space for 5, but you just sort of let it go. All right, so I think we have just a few minutes left. Yeah, and I'm happy to have you. There is one young lady with us this evening. So I want to thank you all for coming and see if anybody has any questions or any or anything that they want to add, like because we do have definitely some people here who have made some beautiful pieces. Well, thank you all for coming. So again, if you're looking for inspiration and tutorials on how to make patterns, so the patterns are something that you can learn from others, that you can create yourself, but while you're doing them, you are just doing them for yourself. You're accepting that even in a pattern there can be a mistake, and you are centering yourself and being in the moment. So I hope you all are able to take some time in the near future to sit down and sort of chill out. I recommend you put on some really nice low-key music, something that relaxes you. It can have lyrics, it cannot have lyrics. I personally recommend an artist called Buckethead and an album called Colma, C-O-L-M-A. It is very fun to draw Zentangle to. I don't know why. I do it a lot. It's a beautiful instrumental guitar album that I would recommend to anybody. And again, that is Buckethead Colma is a great place to start. We would play it, but we don't want to get in trouble with YouTube. So yeah, I'm gonna check the chat to see if there's any last little lingering questions. Oh, thank you, Sue. I try. I have a lot of practice on the phones. And let's see. I appreciate all of you coming. This was really fun to do, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.